This is the Lanshan 2 tent. Some people would say I love this tent and that it's my best pal, and it is. It's an absolutely great tent, but what it isn't is I don't think it's a 4-season tent. It's only a 3-season tent. So in this video I'm going to try to explain to you why I haven't used it. I think it's absolutely brilliant for 3-season use, but not in winter. This is my Vango Force 10, and this is going to be my 4-season tent. So I've used it before in winter, but I've got a few backpacking trips. I'm going to explain to you as well in this video why I'm going to use this for my backpacking in winter over the Lanshan 2. So I'm starting inside here, the Lanshan 2. And the brilliant thing about this tent, what I really loved about it when I used it on the Scottish National Trail and on a couple of other trails I've done now, is the airiness of it. So you can open up all the doors and you can get a nice breeze flowing through. It's got the midge net, so you can use it even when the midges are around, okay? And it's a lovely light airy tent. It's brilliant for using in summer and for backpacking. I really love it. So that lovely airiness to the tent for me becomes a bit of a problem in winter. The only way to get any airflow through the tent and to avoid a lot of condensation is to have the fly sheet set off the ground. You can put it right down to the bottom of the ground in very extreme weather, but the only problem with that is that your condensation inside gets really bad. So if you've got that high at all, now the problem with that in winter is that you obviously get a lot of cold air then coming into the tent, and I was quite aware of that when I used it just before Christmas. Now I know that the 4-season version comes with a solid inner rather than this kind of mesh inner. Would that alleviate the problem? I don't know, I'm not convinced. Alright, I found it quite a cold tent to be in because it just wasn't keeping that wind out, that draft out. So that brings me on to the first of two major reasons why I wouldn't use this tent in winter by choice. And the first one's condensation. You do get condensation with this tent even in summer. The only way you alleviate it, as I've said, is by raising the fly sheet to try and create a through wind. But you do get a lot of condensation with it, and I think that's just made even worse in winter. The problem in winter is it becomes even more critical to keep your kit dry inside your tent. And in summer I found I was pretty much able to do that. But when I used this last time in winter, the issue that I had was that in the night, although it wasn't particularly windy, the wind changed direction. So instead of coming this way, front onto the tent, it came on from the side. And although you have, this kind of creates some of a gap between the inner and the outer, I found that bit of wind was just pushing together the inner and the outer of the tent. And because the condensation was so bad, I actually found that got the bottom of my sleeping bag pretty wet. Now I'd never noticed that, and I used it for 30 days on the Scottish National Trail, never had any issues really with condensation, never found got any of my kit wet, but it did happen when I used it in winter. And as I say, I think it was partly because the wind was blowing these two together and I was getting a lot of condensation on the inside of the tent, which was getting on my sleeping bag, and for me that's just a massive no-no. Now by contrast, coming inside the Force 10, I'm immediately aware of kind of this extra space. The Lanshan 2 is brilliant space for its weight, there's no doubt about that, it's fantastic, but when you come in here, alright, you're just aware of that extra headroom, alright, extra space with your shoulders. And I think you've got to remember that in winter, the likelihood is that you're going to be spending a lot more time in your tent than in summer, long winter nights. And so just for an area in which to be able to use, particularly if there's two of you, this is just far ahead of what the Lanshan's offering. The other thing, I talked about the issues with condensation on the Lanshan. Obviously this tent gets condensation exactly the same, but what you can do is you can avoid, I think, getting it as easily into your inner tent. This tent through its design manages to avoid condensation better than the Lanshan. A couple of reasons. Number one is just the general design of it, but also the gap between the inner and the outer. On here you can see it's much tauter than it was on the Lanshan. See, if you get a change in direction of the wind, all right, the inner and the outer, keep that space between them better than on the Lanshan. So this panel doesn't get wet. So in that same issue that I had with the Lanshan when I used it just before Christmas, my two boys who were camped in here, they never had any condensation problems at all. All right, the inner of the tent was absolutely dry, sleeping bags completely dry. You're still going to get the same condensation on the outer of the tent, all right, but it's just your ability to be able to keep your inner space dry that again makes it much more beneficial for use in winter. Now, as we come back outside the tents, we then come to my second main reason why I wouldn't use the Lanshan in winter. And although, I mean, for its weight, it is absolutely brilliant at standing up to strong winds. All right, amazing, couldn't believe it. All right, and I really like the materials it's made of. It's fundamental, the problem is with its design. And it's because of the size of these panels, okay? And when you get a very, very strong wind, as I know from experience, if it's set this way, front end, this whole side here is going to collapse. Okay, and what it makes for, although it won't blow down, it'll stay up, all right? It does make it really, really noisy, makes it very, very difficult to sleep. And it's not a great, comfortable place to be when you've got the wind blowing it from that direction. If the wind changes direction, as I've talked about already, which it can do in winter, if it hits this side panel here, this side panel just goes straight onto your inner, and then you've got all the problems with condensation that I talked about that I found on my last trip. And it wasn't a very strong wind, I would say it was a breeze, all right, but it changed direction overnight, meant I got that condensation problem in my inner. My inner got wet on the inner of my tent. Although I've not used it in heavy snowfall, if you get heavy snowfall, again, this tent is it's not going to collapse, but you're going to lose a lot of space on it, because what will happen is the snow will build up on here, and as much as you might try and keep it off eventually, that's just going to sink the tent down. And again, you're going to have all the problems with the inner tent, all right, in terms of condensation, keeping the inner dry, all right. It's a brilliant lightweight backpacking tent for summer. It only weighs 1 kilogram. It's fantastic, all right, but for me those two things, all right, make it a no-no for winter. Whereas with this baby, all right, just the design of it, all right, means that it's much more efficient, right, at not being exposed to the wind in the same way, or deflecting the wind better, and also dealing with snow better. So because of its design, all the panels are much smaller and shorter, so it can stand up to wind, all right, pretty much for any direction. Right, it's still better if it's along the ridge line, but it stands up to wind better from any direction. Because of its really steep sides, it sheds the snow better. You're probably going to get issues with the snow on the front door here, all right, well, I'd imagine that front door will collapse a bit, but it's going to shed it from the sides, so you're going to be able to keep that inner tent much drier. I've never used this tent in heavy snow, but I've used a similar design tent, a geodesic dome tent that I had before in heavy snow, and you can keep the inner dry. So this tent is much better at standing up to really strong winds from any direction, and it's also better at shedding snow. So if I'm using a tent in winter, you can get, you know, horrific wind, horrific snow when I'm up in Scotland. I want to know that when I put my tent up, I'm going to have somewhere that's going to keep me dry. It's going to keep me sheltered. That's why this would win for me every time over the Lanshan. Now, all tents, in my opinion, are a compromise in some sort of way, be it cost, be it weight, be it durability, size. There's never one, I don't think, that would fit any of those bills. All right, there would always be one that would be better than another one in some way. And here, I think I've explained why I'd use this in winter. All right, because the advantages it's got, its design, the fact I know it's going to keep me dry, and it's going to keep me the elements out. But if I'm backpacking in summer, the Lanshan wins hands down over the Force 10 because it's super lightweight, 3.2 kilos to 1 kilo. It's super lightweight. The materials are really good. It's lovely and light and airy. I can open it up in summer, get that sunshine in, be sat in my tent with the sun, right? That I can't do in this tent. So it's about that compromise, and I guess we all have our different non-negotiables, all right? Things that are essential to us that might be different to other people, and I guess that's what you've got to consider when you buy your tent, all right? But 2 great tents, but for different seasons. Hope you've enjoyed watching. If you've got any comments, please put them in. Some people have made some fantastic comments and given me some great little tips, all right? I really appreciate them. Thank you very much. And now, here's hoping to get out for some winter trips in that tent.